Welcome, Bears fans, to the Bear Report on YouTube. My name is Andrew Freeman. I am a writer for the Bear Report website, as well as a co-host for the Picks for Polls podcast as a part of the Bear Report podcast network. And today I got a really exciting video for you guys going over my second mock draft for the 2025 NFL draft cycle, specifically looking at the Chicago Bears. I did my first mock draft on the Bear Report website, which you can check out. I'll have a link in the description below. So make sure to check that out when you get the chance. If you want to compare some of the differences I have between that mock draft and the mock draft that I'll be doing today. And yeah, it should be a really exciting one because entering the month of April here by the time that this video does drop, we're officially in the month of the NFL draft. The NFL draft is going to be a few weeks away from now. So after the initial excitement that was NFL free agency, and the Bears certainly were very active at the beginning of free agency, addressing a lot of the needs that many Bears fans, myself included, wanted to see them to address going into the NFL draft. The board's kind of set and the dust is kind of settled to where we know how this roster looks. We know, where this roster is going to be at moving forward here. And we can kind of analyze how the Bears can address current and future needs in this upcoming NFL draft based off of the talent that is available in this draft. And it certainly is going to be exciting to see because I'm sure I'll have very different opinions compared to a lot of different content creators out there when it comes to the Bears and what they're going to be doing in the NFL draft. I'm really excited to get into all of that today. I don't want to ramble on too much. I just want to get into it. Before we get started, though, for all the Bears fans out there that are looking for additional Bears content on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe below. It really helps us out at the Bear Report in terms of pushing out more content for you guys, getting you a lot of stuff as we get into a very busy month with the NFL draft. We're all focused on the Bears and the draft and getting you guys as much information out there as possible, as much content out there as possible. So make sure to leave a like and subscribe below. It really helps us out in terms of pushing us out on the YouTube algorithm. And without further ado, let's get started with this mock draft. All right, so taking a look here, as you can see on my screen here, I am using the PFF mock draft simulator for the purpose of this mock draft today. The reason why I use the PFF mock draft simulator is that, one, I just think it's the best out there. I think it gives you a lot in terms of, they have their grading profiles and their statistical profiles for all these players out there. They have sort of snapshot scouting reports for a lot of these players out there. So it allows you to compare, contrast a lot of these players that you see on the draft board. And while no mock draft simulator is perfect, I think PFF is the most detailed and the best that's out there that we have currently available to us. If there's any others, I'd sure love to hear some of the comments that you guys have in the comment section below for some suggestions for future videos, maybe for different mock draft sites to see how they compare and contrast to this one. But before we get into this mock draft today, a couple of guidelines for how I'm going to be approaching this mock draft. For one, doing all 7 rounds, obviously, for this mock draft when it comes to the Bears. And a couple of big things here for me is I'm not doing any trades for this mock draft. So while I'd love to do a mock draft with trades at a future time, right now it just doesn't seem like the best time to be doing trades. There's a lot of uncertainty out there in terms of, what teams are looking for in this draft. It's a very interesting draft anyway, because the top is not very talented compared to a lot of years. It's not strong at a lot of key positions such as quarterback. Wide receiver is not as talented as most years. Tackle is a very polarizing year this year in terms of how teams view this tackle class. So I'm not going to be projecting any trades for this mock draft, but this is a good exercise to see the type of talent that will potentially be available to the Bears at different spots. And how I'm going to be approaching this is that I'm going to be walking you guys my thought process, why I'm picking certain players, seeing where the board falls to me, who's the best player available, what needs can we address at certain parts in the draft. That's sort of what I'm focused on today. And, hopefully we get something interesting that either you guys agree with what I'm doing here for the Bears or you're disagreeing. Overall, I'm going with the players that I think make the most sense for the Bears, maybe not necessarily who they're going to go with when it's all said and done, but hopefully they can generate some conversation. Through this process, we can see the Bears getting better as a result of these draft selections here. So without further ado, let's get into the simulator. And what I have right here, I'm going to pick the Bears for, they're picking number 10 overall. We're going to do all 7 rounds. This is one of the things I like about PFF's mock draft simulator. You got all the different sliders over here that you can use. We're going to go at a, I guess, fast pace or whatever. That's fine. So as we can see, here are the Bears draft selections. They have 10 overall, 2 picks in the second round at 39 and 41. They got the 39th overall pick from the Carolina Panthers as part of the DJ Moore trade. So the trade that keeps on giving, so to speak. They have their 3rd round selection. They do not have a 4th round pick this year, though. They do have their 5th round pick, no 6th round pick as part of the Jonah Jackson trade, and then 2 7th round picks as part of trades with the Bengals and the Cleveland Browns. So without further ado, let's just get started with this here. So we're going to start this thing. And immediately as we get through the board here, here's how the rest of the top 10 looks like. So pretty standard from what I've seen from most mock drafts. And if the board falls like this for the Bears, man, this is a tough spot to be in. I'll just be upfront with you. I think the number 10 overall selection, it's a pretty rough one in this draft. You're right outside the range where you get outside the true difference makers, I think, in this class. And the difference between number 10 and number 50 in terms of talent in this draft, it's really minimal. There's not a lot of high-end talent in this draft class, in my opinion. Not a lot of sure things, certainly, at number 10. So the best player PFF has available is Tet McMillan out of Arizona at wide receiver. I don't necessarily view wide receiver as a big need. Certainly the type of receiver that McMillan is. I'm not sure if the Bears would be looking for that, especially after they just drafted Rome Odunze in the 1st round last year. I still think they're committed to the trenches and developing there. Ashton Genty's off the board, so for all that conversation piece, he's not available for you there. So in terms of the best players available, here's who you got. Like, you got McMillan, you got Jahdae Barron out of Texas at cornerback. Do you go with safety like Malachi Starks, who's the best safety in this draft class, a very versatile playmaker in the back end of your secondary? And then you get into some other, interesting players like Mike Green and James Pierce are kind of viewed by PFS as the number 2, number 3 edge rushers. Will Johnson, who did not have the best year this past year, has got some questions for him as a cornerback that kind of ran slow or is viewed as a guy who's going to run slow if he does decide to run in this pre-draft cycle. Again, do you go with cornerback to replace Tyreek Stevenson? Who do you view as the best player available ultimately is what it comes down to here. If you go a little bit down the board for PFF, you have guys like Kenneth Grant. You got Josh Simmons at tackle if you want to address tackle. Kelvin Banks, who I view more as a guard, but you could view him as a tackle potentially to replace Braxton Jones. Do you go running back? Omarion Hampton is certainly going to be viewed highly by a lot of people on their draft boards. Colston Loveland is an interesting option. These 2 edge rushers, I think, are going to be really interesting because I do think when it's all said and done, I think the Bears are going to be interested in both of these guys. That's Michael Williams and Shamar Stewart, 2 just really raw edge players who have some intriguing physical traits that fit the mold that Dennis Allen wants to bring to the defensive line. And, for better or for worse, they certainly fit what the Bears are wanting to do on defense with their defensive front in terms of getting bigger and longer at the edge group and getting beefier and getting guys who can defend the run and push the pocket. So this is a tough spot. I really don't love any of these talents here at number 10 for the Bears. I'd love to trade down if I could, but I don't think there's going to be a lot of teams willing to trade up in this year's draft for where the Bears are at, unfortunately. So, man, this is a tough one. I think I'm going to get a lot of flack for this one. I think when it's all said and done, I think if we're looking at the board here, I think the NFL and the Bears specifically are going to view Shamar Stewart a lot higher than certainly me and many other pundits do at this point in time. Shamar Stewart is a love or hate sort of prospect. If you're someone who believes in tools, like sort of the Trayvon Walker effect a few years ago, you're going to love Shamar Stewart and his potential. You look at some of his background here, elite run defender, not necessarily a great edge rusher. He had an elite RES score. I think he had like a perfect 10 in terms of his workout, just a physical freak, elite size. He's listed at like 6'6", 290 at Texas A&M. Came in a little bit lighter than that at the combine. But the big thing for him is that, like, look at his sack production. 2 sacks, according to PFF, in all 3 of his seasons each. right? He led the team in pressures this past year. So he was getting after the quarterback, but he wasn't finishing this past year. And you look at where he played a lot, played kind of all over the place. He played off tackle. He played, kind of over the tackle. He played some B gap. He played some interior defensive line. So he's a guy you can line up and down the line of scrimmage on the defensive line. I think that's what Dennis Allen values. They need to get someone young in this edge room. I think they're going to value Shamar Stewart's upside and what he can bring to the table as a run defender and on stunts early on in his career while they try to develop him as a pass rusher. So it's going to be controversial. Trust me, I don't love the pick either, but that's just kind of the way the board falls. Like, I'm really not in love with any pick at number 10 for what the Bears have available to them. I think Shamar Stewart kind of makes a lot of sense, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you view Shamar Stewart. So addressing edge rusher already, kind of getting that on the board. And with that, here's how the board falls for the first pick in the second round for the Bears. Very interesting here. So you have Josh Connerly, to me, is the top player on the board right now. Tackle out of Oregon. Interesting player, kind of lighter on his feet tackle. Needs to get stronger, but has certainly the upside to be a really solid starter. Tyleik Williams is also an option of Ohio State, more of a nose tackle type. You have some other interesting options here as well. At this point in the draft, you go with running back, a guy like Cam Scadebo, Quinshon Judkins out of Ohio State. Certainly could be interesting. To me, I think the Bears want to draft a tackle at some point in this draft. I don't think they're committed to paying Braxton Jones long-term money. I think they want to continue to invest in this offensive line and get better there. They can get a nose tackle later on in the draft, I think, in my opinion. So Tyleik Williams, while he would be super intriguing, I'm willing to wait for him to be there at 41 or to pick another position if I end up feeling that there's a better option there at another spot. So to me, I'm taking Josh Connerly Jr. out of Oregon. I think he's the best talent for what the Bears have there. I think he fills a need in terms of the future. You can give him a year to kind of develop and get in the weight room a little bit, get stronger, work on his technique to fill in at left tackle long term. You let Braxton Jones leave after this year. That's a successful fifth-round pick for Ryan Poles' regime, getting a starter for 4 years at left tackle out of a fifth-round pick. But I think they're concerned about his injuries. I think they're concerned about whether he can get better in terms of his anchor and whether he's got the ability to continue to improve moving forward. He's kind of stagnated over the last couple of years. And quite frankly, again, I think the injuries and Ben Johnson is going to want to get his own guys here on this offensive line. So you'd be addressing really just overhauling 4 positions on your offensive line in one offseason. So certainly a lot. This is more of a future pick than a current pick, a current need for the 2025 Bears, but you can never have, too much talent on the offensive line, in my opinion. So continue to address that. If Josh Connerly falls to you in the second round, I think that's a good option for them if they want to go that route. And with that said, that gets us to 41. If we're going best player available, I think Tyleik Williams, he is one of the best run defenders in this draft. I think he's got some potential as a pass rusher, but the thing that, really I think sells you here about Tyleik Williams is that, he's somebody that can pair very nicely with Javon Dexter long-term. Javon Dexter is more of a pass rushing defensive tackle. Williams is more of a run stuffing defensive tackle. So you have your guy in Tyleik Williams who can be your 2-down guy, get you to third down. Javon Dexter can be your game wrecker on third down. That's how you can kind of project things, I guess. I'm really intrigued with that selection there if he's available. I go down to the board here. I'm not really interested in the cornerbacks. We've already addressed edge rusher. I'm not really interested in wide receiver. The running backs, very interesting. You could go a Cam Scadebo. You could go a Quinshon Judkins. If you go even further down the board, you get guys like Caleb Johnson and Travion Henderson. All these guys might not be there for the Bears when you get to the third round. And you look at some of the other running backs. Let's just go to the running back position specifically. Dylan Sampson could be an option. You look at some of your third round options. Like, are you willing to overdraft a guy like Damian Martinez, to Devin Neal, RJ Harvey? How do you feel about those guys, right? So, very interesting discussion there, in my opinion, for what's going to be available. Do you want to wait all the way to the 5th round to address running back? I think they're going to want to address this position early on in this draft. that kind of puts you in a bind here. Let's look at defensive tackle for what could possibly be there in the third round for you, because this is how you have to view these things, right? So can I get more of a nose tackle type in the third round? So some of your options for that sort of profile. Alfred Collins, one of my favorite players in this draft class. Kind of your prototypical defensive tackle, nose tackle type of guy. A really big dude who just fills gaps. Dominant run defender at Texas, but doesn't really offer much as a pass rusher. Norman Lott, has that size profile where he can play some nose tackle, right? But he's more of a pass rushing type of defensive tackle. So he could be a guy that could be very interesting in the third round if he's available. Go further down the board. Jordan Phillips certainly would make some sense there as a nose tackle who can do some nice things for you there. Deion Walker, do you want to take that gamble, right? He's certainly someone. So CJ West, he is, more of a nose tackle as well. He's from Chicago, so he kind of has that sort of connection. We know Ryan Poles and this front office loves their Chicago local guys. So I am willing to wait on a nose tackle, I think, and go with a running back here, honestly, because I think this is a position that they're going to want to address. And when I look at the running backs, I'm going to go according to my own rankings here, who I think would be the best fit for this team. And personally, man, this is really tough. To be honest with you guys, I like Trayvon Henderson the most here. And he's a little bit lower for PFF. He's higher on the consensus board. But Trayvon Henderson, really the only concern I really have for him is – the injury history is not great. You're going to have to pair him with somebody else, but you get him with DeAndre Swift, but also they're kind of similar in their skill sets. So that's also something interesting. Caleb Johnson can make a lot of sense if you're looking for more of a two-down impact. Quinshon Judkins makes a lot of sense if you're looking for somebody who has more of that upside. Man, this is really tough. Really tough. So when I look at this here, you know what? I'm going to go with Caleb Johnson. I think the Bears, they want to go more outside zone this year, it seems like, based off of their moves in free agency. I think they want to get, these guys out in space with their offensive linemen. Caleb Johnson is a perfect fit for that outside zone running system. He's an explosive runner. I think he can make a lot of sense here. He's not a 3-down threat right now. So that's probably the big question mark there. So you're going to have to pair him with a receiving back like a DeAndre Swift, but as a first down, second down type of running back, I think Caleb Johnson makes a lot of sense for the Bears and what they want to do. So with those picks, already, we've got an edge rusher, we've gotten a tackle, we've gotten a running back, right? What else can we address here? Well, the board kind of falls perfectly here because Alfred Collins, he's one of my guys in this draft class. I love his run game, run defense. He's got a high floor type of player here. You could go maybe a tight end like Mason Taylor. Terrence Ferguson would certainly be an option. Do you want to go wide receiver? Jalen Noel is pretty interesting. Jalen Royals, I think, could make a lot of sense. I don't know. Alfred Collins, I think he's a steal at this point in the drafts. I have a second round grade on him. I think he's got more pass rushing upside than what he showed in college. He only had, I'm going by the stats here. He only had 18 pressures in his final year at Texas. They did not use him really as a pass rusher. They use him as purely a run defender in their scheme. So he really isn't a proven pass rusher, but he's a phenomenal run defender. He's got a really high floor. You know what you're getting. You need a eventual replacement, I think, for Andrew Billings in the interior there. He pairs well with Gervon Dexter, complements your defensive line really well. I'm going with Alfred Collins in the third round. Give me that run stuffer who can just plug things up, get you to third down, and then you can unleash your pass rushers on third down, do a lot of crazy stuff. So the Bears not having a fourth-round pick, this is where things kind of get interesting because there is going to be a lot of time where a lot of players are going to be going off the board here. So we'll see who's available to them. And we get to the fifth round here. Some needs that I'm thinking that the Bears need to address. Tight end, certainly one of those needs. Wide receiver could certainly be a need for them as well. So I'm content with adding more playmakers, but you could also look to get more offensive linemen here. I think at this point, secondary could be if you want to get a safety in here. That's where you can, let's see, maybe get some depth as well. And the way the board kind of falls here, do you go with the Notre Dame connection here with Mitchell Evans out of Notre Dame? He's someone who is not an explosive athlete whatsoever, kind of like honestly, a poor man's version of Cole Kmet when it's all said and done, right? Kind of has a prototypical tight end size, inline guy, solid blocker, possession receiver, not really explosive, running up the seam, or it's an after the catch guy. But the guy who intrigues me a lot at this point in the draft would be Jackson Haas out of Georgia Tech. He's, for my money, the best blocking tight end in this draft. He can be used in a variety of different ways. And you look at Ben Johnson and how he's used tight end 2, tight end 3s in the past. They're more blockers anyway. And Jackson Haas, he's someone who can line up as a fullback. He can line up out wide. He can line up in the slot. He can line up inline. He can line up everywhere. He can block a variety of different schemes. He can be used as a weapon in the run game. And I think they're going to try to emphasize the run game, I think, here with Ben Johnson over the next few years. Try to take a little bit of the pressure off of Caleb Williams so he doesn't have to throw the ball as much. So he's not a weapon in the passing game. You look at, let's look at his stats here, right? He only had 16 receptions last year in his lone season at Georgia Tech. He played at a lower level competition in 2023 and 2022. Not a lot of production as a receiver there either. So he's not somebody who's going to contribute as a receiver. You're getting him specifically as a blocker here, as a blocking specialist, but he can add a lot of value for you there. And if you want to run the ball, if you want to, let the physicality of your offensive line take control for you here on offense for the Bears in Ben Johnson's offense, you need a tight end who's willing to stick his nose in there and get dirty. And I think Jackson Haas makes a lot of sense if you're looking that direction. So in the 5th round, where you're not going to get a tight end with a lot of receiving upside anyway, get the guy who can play a valuable role as a blocking specialist. I'm going to go there as well. And now we wait till the 7th round. We're going to have 2 picks in the 7th round. And by that point, you're looking at specialists. You're looking at guys who can just, find areas to contribute, maybe as special teamers, practice squatters, some guys with maybe some upside. So I look at the board as it falls right here. Malcolm Moore is kind of interesting as a safety. Not a lot of guys that I am rushing to the podium, obviously, to draft. There's a couple guys. Let's see who's available for offensive line, because I think you want to continue to add talent there. If we're looking at talent, Clay Webb's probably the most talented guy on the board, but there's some off-field concerns. There's a reason why he was playing at Jacksonville State. I'm not going to get into some of the off-field stuff. A lot of it is speculation anyway. But one of the guys that intrigues me is Marcus Ware out of Montana State. Small school guy, played guard for them, but you look at PFF, he graded elite as a run blocker, zone blocker especially. He's a really good athlete. Small level competition, right? But if you're looking to get a developmental right guard, he's a good athlete, plays nasty. I really like what I saw from him when I went back and watched him as a late day 3 sort of guy. I think he'd be very interesting as a developmental piece where you've gotten now, you're starting 3 with Joe Thuney, with Drew Dahlman, with Jonah Jackson as your 3 starters on the interior. You need somebody behind them, though, to develop potentially to take over for them, or at least be a solid backup, because Jonah Jackson has an injury history. Joe Thuney is getting up there in age. He's not going to be around forever. He might start to get some injuries, even though he has been pretty, durable for his entire career, one of the most durable careers you could possibly ask for, right? And Drew Dahlman certainly had his injury histories in the past. So let's get Marcus Ware in here. I think he's interesting, developmental guard. Maybe he can play some center for you, but you get him in here, get him to develop, bring him into camp, have him compete with some of these other guys on the roster, and you see what happens. And then for this last pick, it really, special teams is certainly something where you're looking to address here. I'm just looking at guys who could potentially be available here, maybe future needs. You're not really looking for a guy who's going to be a starter for your long term, though. So that's sort of the caveat there. When I look at who's available here at this point in the draft, I think you maybe go to the secondary or linebacker and you try to address something there. There's not a ton of options. You could go wide receiver here. I could certainly see that. It's not. I'm not falling in love with any of these guys here. Zakari Franklin could be interesting as like a guy you bring in to be a slot receiver or a return specialist for you. In fact, I might like that just because they need to get somebody like they've addressed returner, I think, with Devin Duvernay, but he's only brought in on a 1-year deal. Olamide Zaccheaus is kind of the undersized slot receiver, so they have Tyler Scott on the roster already, so they kind of already have that, I guess, on the roster. Kyron Lacey is an interesting player just because his talent is really present, but just never really took advantage at the collegiate level. Just not a lot of consistency. I don't think they're going to like his blocking ability as well. Look, I don't want to overanalyze. It's a 7th round pick. It's nothing to where it's going to change the outcome of this draft for you. So for me, Drew McCoy, I mean, he's an outside receiver, more of a blocking type of receiver. They need to get some size on the outside, though. So maybe I'll talk myself into Drew McCoy. In fact, I think that's what I'm going to do. Get someone who's more of a blocking type on the outside, gives you a bigger body on the outside, maybe can contribute on special teams. So PFF, one of the things they do is that they grade your draft when it's all said and done. So let's see how they view this thing. I did not expect the first round to do very well. Shamar Stewart is not very high on their board. They like the Josh Connerly pick, a B+ there. Caleb Johnson, they're kind of lower on. I can kind of see that, running back, it is what it is. I mean, that 2nd round cluster of running backs is really tough. It's more about skill set that you're looking for, and they don't really love the day 3 picks either. So not a great grade. They gave me a B-, which is, I mean, it's okay for what the Bears have available to them. So here's what the draft looks like. Shamar Stewart in the 1st round. I'm sure it's going to be very controversial, similar to Ashton Jeanty, but I would not rule it out, Bears fans. Trust me that the NFL is going to view Stewart higher than I think a lot of people are willing to admit right now. Josh Connerly, I think that's a steal in the 2nd round if he's available. Caleb Johnson, I mean, you could plug and play with Quinshon Judkins. You can, Trayvon Henderson. Any one of these running backs I think would make a lot of sense. I think Caleb Johnson makes a lot of sense for what they're looking for in terms of an outside zone running back. So that's why I picked him at 41 overall. You get Alfred Collins in the 3rd round, run stuffer, great nose tackle prospect for you guys with a high floor. Not a lot of pass rushing upside, but certainly there is stuff there that you can potentially unlock. Jackson Hawes, a blocking specialist at the tight end in the 5th round. Marcus Ware, a bigger athletic guard from a small school out of Montana State, to be kind of a developmental guy in the interior. And then Brew McCoy out of Tennessee, not a dynamic receiving talent, but he gives you more size on the outside, something that they don't really have in the receiving core right now, someone who can maybe be more of a blocking specialist potentially for you down the road. And that's the draft here. So let me know, for all of our viewers out there, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. And of course, make sure to like and subscribe to this video here on YouTube. Curious to hear your thoughts on this draft, and also, take me through your own mock drafts. What did you guys do? What are you valuing here? What do you want to pick? Who would have you have taken had you had a similar board at these different spots? Who would have been your guys' pick? So I'm really curious to see. Definitely continue to do that stuff in the comment section below. And I really willing to interact with you guys out here on YouTube. But with that said, that's going to do it for us here at the Bear Report for this 2nd mock drafts. I've been yapping long enough for this thing. Make sure to like, subscribe. Make sure to follow me. You can follow us on the Bear Report on Twitter at Bear Report. You can follow me at AJ Freeman 25. Make sure to check out my stuff on the Bear Report over the next month or so. Going to be having a lot of scouting reports for the Bear Report on the website over the next month. And make sure to check out the Picks for Polls podcast and the Bear Report podcast, as well as the Hallis Beat. We have a lot of good stuff coming up over the next month with the NFL draft coming up. So make sure to keep on checking that stuff out for the Bear Report. But until next time, Bears fans, have yourself a great rest of your week, and bear down.